How to handle customer doubts and resistance, part 1. That is, how to deal with the reality that clients may express objections to our plans, suggestions, and measures in shape of doubts, resistance, indifference, silence, and negative. Welcome, I'm David. Why do we say that handling and overcoming of clients' objections is a conflictive situation? Well, because until that moment of the sales interview, everything has gone well. At first, there was a good contact with the client, followed by a positive conversation between the salesperson and the customer, during which the seller used his questioning technique to get the client to express his problems, interests, and needs. What the seller uses to tailor its offer to the client's situation based on the characteristics, features, advantages, and benefits of his product or service as the solution to the client's interest, and the pleased customer enjoys the seller presentation. Remember, the salesperson objective is to satisfy their customer needs, but at that moment, a doubt arises on the face of the client that immediately rises to the seller, a strong objection, that if it is not handled and overcome properly, it will cause the paralysis of the sales interview. Now is the time for our salesperson to skillfully use the techniques for handling and overcoming objections. But let us start from the beginning. The first question we must ask ourselves is, what is an objection? And we will answer that before our suggestions, measures, ideas, offers, propositions, products, services, and solutions, sometimes customer raises objections. This is usually true. And now with the answer to the question, what is an objection, we can point out that any indifference, doubt, silence, refusal, resistance, incidents, or claim by the client that seems to delay the progress of our sales interview. Here it should be noted that objections in general should not be necessarily regarded as bad or negative. They can be a positive sign because they establish a double communication with the client, and so we can know her thoughts, their positioning, and obtain information from the client when formulating them. In addition, objections can be expression of 1. The need for more information, 2. Interest on the part of the client, 3. Tactics by the client, 4. A resistance to buy. And all these aim at our figure as sales professional. But let's see. 1. The need for more information. Here the customer does not put us objections. What happened is that the seller has not given him all the information that this customer requires. And the seller takes it as a resistance, a customer objection to buying our product or service. 2. Interest on the part of the client. The customer is interested, wants to be convinced, and therefore raises his last doubts and questions to be fully convinced by the seller. Therefore, what he expresses is interest in the subject that we are offering him. 3. Tactics by the client. This situation could pose a danger to the seller, since it may be that the client is interested in our proposal, but he knows something, that if there is a strong moment for the client and a weak one for the salesperson, it is at the end, towards the end of the interview, where tactically the customer sometimes raises a false objections to make the salesperson nervous and give him the last nut grip to get something extra from the sales professional. The seller, who already took the operation for granted, feels that he can escape and then gives in and grants things that under normal circumstances he would not grant. In this way, the client takes advantage of the situation with his tactics. 4. A resistance to buy. In this situation, what happens is that, recalling the figure of the balance of previous videos, which expressed a whole situation of the sale, compared to the price that the customer has to pay in one of the plates, in the other are the benefits that the seller puts. Now what happens is that the client does not just see that the weight of the benefits offered by the seller compensates the effort that is asked of him in the form of price, and therefore logically resists. It could also be that the customer feels or remembers that there are superior benefits in the offer of the competition. And for all this, the customer shows his resistance to buy. The question now is how to discover the resistance and doubts of the client, because doing it so, it will be easier to sell what we are offering. If we have to express, even paint an objection, it will be very useful to represent it as a figure of an iceberg. We already know that only the tip of the iceberg appears from the surface of the sea, that is 1/9 of its total volume, and that the other 8/9 part of the entire volume of the iceberg are below the surface. With objections, the same could happen, that the tip of the iceberg, objection, is seen on the surface, and most of it remains hidden below the surface, is not seen. Here the danger is that the seller believes that he sees everything, and prematurely launches himself to try to give the solution to that part that he sees, the tip, without realizing that what he sees is not the entire problem, that it is a ghost, and that it is useless to give solutions to that ghost because the real problem is the entire iceberg, what is seen and what is hidden underneath of the surface. Therefore, the first thing that the seller must do is bring out the part that could be hidden from the iceberg, so that once he sees the entire problem, the iceberg in its entirety, now he will be in condition to start looking for the solution to that problem or objection. So now comes the question of how to discover the resistance, objections and doubts of the client. In other words, what are the tactics and techniques to follow to achieve that objection, that it is to bring out the hidden part of the iceberg? We are going to give several solutions. 1. Through questions. Example, why do you say that, Mr. Client? This is a very important test question. 2. Through pauses, for the client to speak more, making a good pause. 3. Emptying the customer. Example, besides this, is anything else, Mr. Client? Another test question and another long pause. 4. Provoke the exit of the objection. Example, you seems to doubt, Mr. Client. What is it what makes you doubt? 5. Letting the client speak without interrupting him. Usually the client will tell us everything. 6. Sometimes, if it is appropriate, to give few quick benefits to the client, and thus the client will ask for more. This is for superior benefits in the offer of the competition. 7. With a test-provoke closing technique. Take the operation for granted and observe the customer's reaction. In the next video, part 2, we will develop some effective techniques for overcoming objections for the part of the client. And okay, if you are interested in our videos, I suggest you give a like and subscribe to our channels in English and in Spanish, as we publish videos every week.